Hello again, I'm Bridget Behe with Michigan State University, and this is the third of 5 videos discussing our research on how to attract new customers to local garden centers. In our third video segment, I'll discuss the 2 remaining key findings from our consumer consultants. You'll learn a little bit about where they're shopping for plants and why. I'll also discuss our most surprising insight, which shows just how insecure consumers are when it comes to plants. As we seek to develop some marketing strategies to better connect Gen X and Gen Y to plants, we'll first thank the industry sponsors who made this work possible. American Hort, USDA, and the Ohio Department of Agriculture generously funded this research. The research and marketing team was comprised of Carol Miller, editor of Meister Media Worldwide, Susan Hogan of Actionable Results and Research and adjunct professor of marketing at Emory University, Lynn Swidinowski, founder and president, Creative Business Consulting Group, and me, Bridget Behe, professor in the Department of Horticulture at Michigan State University. In this video, we're going to continue along the steps in our investigation, and we're going to focus on identifying key findings. Our third finding related primarily to where our consumers were shopping, and what we found was not really surprising, but it was interesting to note that the majority clearly chose the home improvement or the hardware store first. About 85% of the moms, about 82% of the Gen X, and about 54% of the Gen Y, the home improvement store or the hardware store was their first choice for where most of the purchases were made. Kind of in second place, and these percentages don't add up to 100% because they could shop at multiple locations, but about in second place equally were the locally owned freestanding garden center and the supermarket or grocery store. We saw approximately half of each of the 3 consumer groups had made a purchase either at the locally owned freestanding garden center or the supermarket grocery store. It was also interesting for us to note that way in much lower in terms of a percentage, you wouldn't really say last place, but significantly lower, were the purchases that were made online, from the internet, through a print catalog, or someplace else. Now, it's not trivial to note that 18% of those Gen Y, the 30 to 49-year-olds, made a purchase online, but still it's several times lower than the percentage of individuals who made purchases at the home improvement store, the independent garden center, or the supermarket. And then it would appear that print catalogs are somewhat lower than online purchases, and someplace else we had some respondents indicating that they had purchased plants at other venues, but they really weren't substantial compared to the top 3. Now, what were some of the reasons that they chose those stores to make their plant purchases? Well, primarily it was for convenience. It was a store that was on their way to or from work. It was on their bus route. It was close to where they live. It was someplace that they already were doing some shopping. So convenience was pretty much head and shoulders above most of the other reasons that our consumers gave about store choices. Now, secondarily was price, or that value relationship, what you get for what you pay. They were looking for a good value, sometimes looking for plants on sale, or plant material that they perceived to be relatively inexpensive. So the price was a relatively high concern for them, and we'll look down a little bit lower and we see that quality was number 4. So thinking about the choice reason, the price really did supersede the quality of the plants. Now, in third place was the variety or the selection, the diversity of choices. And it's interesting to note that they didn't need substantial or giant selections, but they had sufficient selections from which to make their choices. In fourth place was the quality or the health or the beauty of the plants. And so they wanted to really focus on something that was convenient and had a good value offering compared to really the lushness or the quality or the beauty. And then a little bit further down was the employee service or customer service, how helpful or knowledgeable the employees were who worked in that particular retail plant center. A little bit further down, but still a significant reason for making the store choice, was wanting to buy something that was locally grown. Keeping the dollars locally, directly affecting or helping the community was a reason that they selected the particular store from which they made purchases. And we didn't see much of an effect from reading reviews or doing research or looking at pictures, but really the headlines were convenience, price, and a sufficient quantity from which to make a selection. So kind of to summarize what we saw in those two previous graphs, they are shopping where it's convenient for them. And convenience is certainly a perception. They may be passing by an independent garden center and don't understand that the business is there. It's not in their awareness. And the box store was mentioned most often. And probably some of that has to do with them having projects or other reasons to take them to that box store. They also talked a lot about getting a good deal. Price came up, but this notion that we'll cover next about luck and risk, price is a big concern if the plant doesn't grow and thrive. And so having a good deal probably reduced some of their perception of risk and made them feel a little more comfortable in that plant choice or in that store choice. Selection and one-stop shopping were mentioned quite a bit relative to convenience, and we believe this played into some of why the store was perceived to be convenient, that they could get multiple product lines at one particular store. They could get the fertilizer, the tools, they could get a little bit of information, but they could also accomplish some other, get some other things from their shopping list. So convenience really was a big key finding in our research. Now the fourth key finding I alluded to in the previous slide. This has to do a lot with luck and risk. And in my years of conducting market research, I have never come across success in a product category that can be attributed not really to expertise or making a wise choice, but it really was attributed to luck. And Deb Behe gave us a quote that really kind of summarizes the whole notion of why I'm so unlucky. And she says, the very first rose bush that I planted all by myself actually survived, and those are her 2 exclamation points put in there. She said, until that point, I had extremely bad luck with roses and was all but ready to throw in the towel. Then I was at Lowe's one day and I saw this gorgeous rose bush with a single flower on it, and I thought, no, Deb, it doesn't deserve to die. But then impulse won over and I bought it anyway, and I brought it home and planted it carefully, and the next year it had buds and new growth. So you can see the tremendous emotion, the concern over wanting that plant to live, but no, it doesn't deserve to die. And so I think many consumers feel this way, that they would like to have some more plant material, but they really feel unlucky, and that making a plant purchase is risky. And this emotionally charged decision continues on when the plant does die. And Renee S. gave us a quote. She said, the thing that I like least about gardening is that sometimes plants just die, and you just get so upset about it. I could watch the plants and make sure that they are healthy, and if I have questions about why my plants are dying, I can go to someone that has more experience than I do about them. So here, we see again this wanting to be successful and having some information, but just not quite feeling like they could do it, and the just tremendous negative emotion that comes from watching that plant die, watching that investment get lost. So to recap or summarize the 4 key findings before we move into how to operationalize some of these and adopt this information into marketing campaigns, let's recap the 4 key findings. The first one was that the act of gardening has mostly positive impressions. Although there are some significant negatives, it's dirty, it requires weeding, it's hard work, and we need to address some of those negative perceptions. The second key finding was that consumers have a distinct idea of the type of person who gardens, the kind of older person in a floppy hat, and we believe that this could be a limiting viewpoint. We need to do some work to help combat this stereotype or misperception. Our third key finding was that garden centers are the 3rd most popular place to buy plants after box stores and grocery stores. The only exception to this was the 30 to 49-year-old group of consumers, and they preferred local garden centers over grocery stores. And our 4th key finding was that consumers lack a sense of control when it comes to gardening. We repeatedly heard the terms luck and risk, luck when they were successful, risk when they weren't successful, when they were describing the act of gardening. As you can see, there was a lot we didn't know about how younger consumers view our products in stores. In our next video, I'll outline 2 of the 4 marketing campaigns which will help retailers adapt these findings to draw younger customers to their store and products.